Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Glue Stick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D, including rules. And today, it's time to answer a question one of my patrons asked. And since it ties in nicely with the Magic Item series, let's have a chat about attunement and its broader implications. So first, the basics. An item can be attuned to only one creature at a time, and a creature can be attuned to no more than 3 magic items at a time. Any attempt to attune to a 4th item fails, and the creature must end its attunement to that item first before it can attune to another one. Additionally, a creature can't attune to more than one copy of an item. For example, a creature can't attune to more than one ring of protection at a time. This just limits the magic items that require attunement and gives a handy game mechanic to apply to items that you don't really want characters to take advantage of, because they will, as we all would, given half the chance. So a character can have a sword that is magical that doesn't require attunement, and a shield that does, and a helm that does, and a ring that does. They can still wear armor that requires attunement, but they won't be able to use anything other than its basic properties as armor, or any magical properties that it grants without being attuned. Also, the creature can make use of any wondrous item, potions, scrolls, and so on. Already, we see room for being very creative. When I mentioned a suit of armor that provides some degree of magical protection, even if the character wearing it is not attuned to it, there is nothing to say that's not possible. There's also something very nasty you can do to a player character with a cursed magic item, and that you have it use up all 3 attunement slots until the character manages to rid themselves of the thing. Your players will absolutely flip the table if you rule that as soon as they equip that thing, the other items they're attuned to just stop working. And if this is any other curse effect, well, there may be threats to leave the game. If that happens, just blame me and assure them that there will always be some way to end this curse. They just trust you and carry on. Artifacts have a range of often random negative effects that they inflict on their users. I think being attuned, certainly hogs, attunement hogs in particular is a good example to add to the list of negative effects that an artifact can have. If your character, if your player is seriously considering ditching one item in order to use another, they are having a good time at the table, I assure you. Even if it does feel like torturous choices, there's a 100% chance that they are thinking about their character and the game, and that's very engaging. So another question is, can you have multiple ion stones? Yes, you can. Each type counts as a different magical item type, not a duplicate ion stone, unless they are exactly the same type of ion stone. So that's a specific example just to give you one. A character's attunement to an item ends if the creature no longer satisfies the prerequisites for the attunement. If they are a paladin of Suni, for instance, and they get hideously disfigured by a spray of acid to the face, Suni may actually revoke their paladin spellcasting powers until they can get that unsightly mess healed. It's just one of the fickle aspects of the goddess of beauty. However, technically, they're still a paladin, so if an item needs them to be a paladin, they're fine. If they need to be an elf and are transformed into an orc by a polymorph spell, technically, they're still an elf. The elf attunement bow will still work just fine. If they die and get reincarnated as a human though, they are no longer an elf, and the bow will no longer share its magic with them. If the item has been more than 100 feet away for at least 24 hours, if the creature dies for any length of time, or if another creature gets the item and spends a short rest concentrating on it, they can be attuned to it instead, and the original character will lose their attunement. A creature can also voluntarily end an attunement by spending another short rest focused on the item unless the item is cursed. So with the whole short rest thing, yes, the character still gains all the benefits of the short rest. No, you can't attune to an item you have not identified, and doing that requires another whole short rest. You can't identify and attune to the item during the same short rest, but I see no reason why you can't do that over the course of a long rest. So if I made a magic ring that provided protection from non-magical cold, or if attuned to it by a member of the Harpers, for instance, also provided protection from magical cold attacks and +1 damage to get rolls against any creatures with resistance or immunity to fire damage, that would be an example of an item that would be handy to keep even if you're not attuned to it, or if you're not a Harper, but it would certainly be far more worth to the Harpers than anyone else, and they would seek to reacquire it any chance they can, particularly of somebody who's a non-Harper, who might resist this because they happen to like having protection from non-magical cold. Attuning to the weapon is simple enough. If it is a weapon, the character uses it in some weapon practice. If it's a wondrous item, they sit and examine it very carefully, thinking about it in a deep and meditative way. In any event, they will spend the time completely engrossed in finding out what makes the item tick. If the short rest is interrupted, the attunement fails. Otherwise, at the end of the short rest, the character now has an intuitive understanding of how to activate any magical properties of the item, including any unnecessary command words. This is certainly an improvement from older versions of the game where the DM would cackle away sitting on the command word and not reveal it to anybody unless they went on some sort of quest to uncover it or ask a sage or some such. So they've sort of circumvented that. So this raises another question. If the character has attuned to the magical whip of wind gusts and know what the command word is, which is an ow, but at some point it got stolen by a goblin and it was handed over by that goblin to the tribal shaman, who just got murdered by the party rogue and is now sitting on the ground next to the dead shaman, and the crowd of goblins are charging at the character who was previously attuned to it. Can they just pick it up and crack that whip yelling the command word, or will they need another short rest to attune to it again, even though they know all there is to know about how to use it? Well, in the case of a command word, that character will not need to attune to that item again to use it. They can just pick it up and let fly with a gust of wind spell. They only need to attune to it to learn what the command word is and how to say it at just the right moment during the use of that whip. And that's the important thing. Someone who just overheard the command word and picked up the whip and tried to use it without having attuned to it most likely won't be able to activate its power correctly because they don't understand exactly how to do it. In fact, it might even backfire on them. This is pretty much entirely up to the DM, and I highly recommend the netbook of 10,000 random magical effects, for instance, is like that. In fact, I might even find a link to it and put it down below. If in doubt, the wind is blowing from the southeast, you hear a dog bark, or anyone at the table is wearing blue, always use a magical random table. That's my motto. I mean, it is basically your chance to play as the DM, and who knows what will happen. Some of the best anecdotes start with a random dice roll. One thing that is not revealed by simple attunement is how many charges an item already has, or currently has, or what its maximum charges is. But or how these charges are stored in an item can be made known to the character. That is really only of interest to those who can cast the Identify spell, which reveals all the information about the item, or if there is some chance of damaging the item if all of the charges are expended in one day. That's certainly something that the player characters should be concerned about. I prefer it when magical items that can be cast spells use power charges, as it can be tweaked in such a way that the character could cast a spell using a sorcerer's meta magic options, or cast the spell at a higher level, as usually the spell is cast at the lowest possible spell level if it's listed as a spell which is able to be used by the item. Although the character can use it without having to expend their own personal spell slots or bother with spell components, I mean, really, who bothers with spell components anyway? It is not impossible to have a magical item that can be attuned to only be used by spellcasters who have spell slots, and instead of charges, it expends the character's own slots. This allows someone like a sorcerer who has limited spell selection to have quick and convenient access to other spells, but it avoids them becoming a spell machine gun because it is still limiting how many spell slots they have. The beauty of creating your own versions of magical items is that you can include all sorts of specific effects, mechanics and restrictions in the description text. You can also be very specific about what the item can do, but don't worry, your players will always find some loophole to make you regret ever giving it to them in the first place. That's just the rule of Dungeons & Dragons, one of the unwritten ones. Wizard staffs are the perfect example of a spellcasting enhancer that uses the wizard's own spellcasting abilities. If the character has more than one spellcasting ability, they can choose which one to use with the staff, or with any other item for that matter. If they don't have spellcasting abilities, such as a rogue who's attempting to make a use magic device feature of their class, they can just apply their proficiency bonus, nothing else. Talking of rogues, they specifically can't use their fast hands ability with magic items, though the wording of that ability really seems like they could. It reads, starting at 3rd level you can use the bonus action granted by your cunning action to make a dexterity sleight of hand check using your thieves tools to disarm a trap, open a lock, or make the use of an object or item. The player may ask why use an object does not include magical objects that require activation. You can just say specific rules override general rules, sorry. They will probably make a very logical case for why this rule is bullshit, and frankly, I'd just let them spend an inspiration point and have at it. Requiring the use of an inspiration point to do something in a rules grey area is a very good example of the DM's soft no. So you're saying not never, but you are saying yes, but you better be sure it's worth it. And it usually is if the player has to cross off anything on their character sheet, any sort of expendable thing. They'll think twice about using it. I like the idea of having alternate forms of the command to activate the item as well, particularly if it seems like a pain in the ass to the players, until it proves to be something tactically beneficial. An example is swapping a verbal command word to activate the item with something like cutting the character's hand, inflicting a single point of damage. Now imagine the enemies have cast a silent spell over the entire area, and the character calmly slices a finger, activates activating the item anyway, and then throwing a fireball right into their shocked faces. It's totally worth it. Now imagine a blade of green infernal steel, blackened by heat, slicing through that finger, and the character wincing as they drain 1d6 hit points to cast the fireball, and spend a further 1d4 hit points to give it the empowered metamagic trait as they point the dagger and release the spell. I love the idea of magical items that literally drain the life from the character. There's a lot of that in movies and TV shows. The characters will show no mercy to their characters if the stakes are high enough. And imagine that poor character getting healed yet again, or spending all their money on healing potions, having nightmares about the item draining them while they sleep, or they dream that they've woken up with it plunged into their chest, feeding on their heart, then waking up for real, screaming and clutching at their torso. They might even end up having a phobia of daggers or some such if the player keeps forcing them to basically torture themselves. While you can wear a circlet of intellect and a helm of true seeing at the same time, you can't wear two magical rings on one finger. That's just well-established D&D lore. Or one tentacle for that matter, if you're that way inclined. Also, if the character has only 1 foot and a wooden peg leg, they can't use boots of elven kind. Boots have to be worn on both the actual feet, strapping one to the wooden leg, although an innovative idea, it just won't work. There's no reason why magical horses can't use There's no reason why horses can't use magical shoes, but if they were intended to be used by centaurs, they might require a command word that's impossible for the horse to say, and just riding the horse doesn't impart the ability to command the item either. A saddle can be said to be worn by both the horse and the rider though, and it might have the power that is attuned to the person who sits on it, with general access power the horse benefits from as well. So it might probably be a rare thing to need to attune to a saddle, unless it's a specialist like paladin saddle and the character spends a lot of their time in it every day and carries it around with them when they're not riding. This is an example.